and welcome to the QTube channel. I'm Hannah Cotter, and today we have a very special guest with us, ESPN basketball insider Jeff Goodman. Jeff, how are you?
I'm great. How you guys doing?
Fantastic. So, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the new coach here at Quinnipiac after Tom Moore was fired and replaced with Baker Dunleavy. Do you think this is a positive change for Quinnipiac?
You know, this is a tough one for me because I know both guys well, and I've known Tom Moore for about 15 years. One of the first people I met when I got into the business here doing basketball and recruiting. And, Tom, to me, high-class guy, does things the right way, did a great job at UConn. And I think the hardest part for him was really raising the expectations early. And I think if he had won one of those conference title games against Robert Morris, he probably would have gotten a bigger job. On the flip side, I think Baker Dunleavy is a terrific young coach. I think he's smart. He works hard. All you have to do is look at what that Villanova program did since he was elevated to an assistant coach and see the impact that he had on that program. So I have mixed feelings. Again, I hate to see Tom Moore out of a job because I think he's a really good coach, and I don't think he'll be unemployed for long. But I do think that Baker Dunleavy was a terrific hire.
Now, I know there had been talks about Grasso coming in and being the main coach, and Dunleavy kind of came out of nowhere. What do you think happened?
Well, I just think they felt like, hey, listen, if we're not going to get a head coach, somebody with head coaching experience, we're going to get an elite-level assistant coach. And while Jared Grasso has done a great job at Iona is not Villanova, right? And Baker Dunleavy is a guy that had done it at the highest level, had recruited at the highest level, had coached elite-level players. It's easier to sell that to a place like Quinnipiac than a guy even coming home like Jared Grasso would have done.
So like you said, it's going to be a huge recruiting process now that we have Dunleavy here coming from a big name school like Villanova. Do you think there are any possible ramifications for Quinnipiac?
You know, anytime you have a new coach, you have to almost assume that there's going to be turnover. Kids don't know Baker Dunleavy, so they may leave. Baker Dunleavy may have seen some of these kids and say to himself, hey, you know what, a couple of these kids probably aren't good enough. And he may not force them out, but he may put the handwriting on the wall of, hey, listen, you could stay, you have a scholarship, but you're probably not going to play a whole lot. So there's going to be turnover. I do the transfer list every year, and last 2 years it's been over 700 people. So that's about two per program per year, and that's a lot of those. Again, you're not taking into account a coaching change. So you look at some of these programs that have had coaching changes, they've got a mass exodus. I don't know if you'll see a mass exodus, but I think you will see significant turnover at Quinnipiac with the coaching change.
So what do you think we can expect from Dunleavy as a coach?
Well, you know what? He's a guy that's very cerebral, very smart, works hard. I think he's obviously got a great coaching acumen, with his dad. With Jay Wright, he's learned from a lot of really good coaches, and I think the other part is certainly Quinnipiac has the resources within the league. So it's going to take a little while just because you got to give a guy a year or two to get in his own players, put in his own system and style, and get acclimated. A lot of people want to judge it right away, and I don't think that's going to be fair with Baker Dunleavy. I think you've got to give him some time. And really, you're judging a guy on years 3 and 4 going forward. But the first 2 years, I generally, unless they're taking over a really good team, and even then it's hard because you're taking over a really good team with somebody else's players, it's hard to assess a program in the first 2 years.
So kind of going off of that, how far do you think, under his leadership, Quinnipiac will be from the Big East?
I think the next step may be, can they go Atlantic 10? I think going up to the Big East is crazy for a school like Quinnipiac. That's stepping 2 steps, skipping 2 steps. I think that's crazy. To me, I think the logical next step is trying to get in the A-10 if you're Quinnipiac, and you're not ready to do that yet. You go into the A-10 now, you're going to get blasted for years. And I don't even think Baker Dunleavy would want to do that immediately. I think, again, after a couple of years, get some stability, fight for titles in this league, and then have a chance to go up to the A-10. That would be my thought, but who knows what the school's thinking about that.
Do you have any ideas on a long-term impact that he might have on this program?
Again, with a guy like Baker, I think I think you can get there eventually. I think you can get to a place like the A-10. And I think that's going to be his vision, is to compete at the highest level. The problem with a guy like Baker, too, is if he wins, you're going to lose him. It's just the way it's going to be. I mean, listen, the bottom line is he's got a name. He's got a pedigree. So Quinnipiac, unfortunately, like a lot of other jobs, mid-major jobs, it's a stepping stone job in a way. So if Baker Dunleavy does well at Quinnipiac, he's going to have big boys coming at him. That's just the nature of the business. But if you're at Quinnipiac, you want to get as much from him as possible to put it in position that if he can get this program to the A-10 and then be competitive in the A-10, let's say, then if he leaves for a higher profile job, you can get another guy like him, another guy with a good name, and keep this thing going. That ultimately, everybody strives in the mid-major to be like a Butler, right? I mean, Brad Stevens did what he did, getting him in 2 championship games. He leaves for the NBA, and they bring in a guy like Chris Holtman. It was a different deal at Butler. Holtman was an assistant coach who took over for Brandon Miller when he left suddenly, but Butler's been able to sustain it. Gonzaga's been able to sustain it. Wichita State, Dayton, those are the programs you strive to be, but they're a long way away from that right now.
Like you said, they're a long way from becoming programs like that. Do you think that there will be any immediate short-term impacts on his coaching?
I just think, listen, staff is very, very important. Because if you're Baker Dunleavy, you've never called the timeout, you've never called the play.
Right.
You've been an assistant coach under Jay Wright, learning, and a player under Jay Wright. So you better hire a good staff that, number one, have an older guy on staff that can kind of help you with the coaching part of it, and number two, you better have assistants on your staff that can really go out there and get players. And you got to delegate, and that's a hard deal because you don't know what you're walking into right now. And all the fires you got to put out, or everything you've got to deal with. So you've got to be able to delegate to those assistant coaches and trust that they're going to be able to do the right thing. Because if you're Baker Dunleavy, you got to get out there too and raise some money and talk to get some something going in the program. Talk to the boosters, talk to the students, all that. You got a lot to do. So hiring a staff, I used to grade hires right away based on the head coach, and now I've understood that. I don't even want to grade them, period, but you want to wait till you find out who their assistant coaches are, because it really depends. The grade or what you think of Baker Dunleavy largely depends on the staff he hires. If he hires a great staff, you're more apt to give him an A. Well, and I would, based on just Baker, I would probably give it an A. But if he hires a really crappy staff, I wouldn't give him an A. That matters significantly to his success.
So we have a lot to look forward to, I think, in the next few years under Dunleavy's leadership. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just that, again, listen, it's one of the best hirings of the offseason for me. Craig Amodio did a great job with the help of a search firm, which I'm not a big proponent of search firms, but they did a good job identifying the right guy. And, I was told early on they were going to pay the money and go after some big-name guys. Mark Schmidt was one of them early. They didn't get a guy like him, but I think they got a rising star in Baker Dunleavy. I think the program's in good hands. And again, sad to see Tom Moore go, but the life of a head coach, unless you're at Duke, Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, and even those places. Look at Billy Gillespie at Kentucky. He only lasted a couple of years, but it's hard. It's a hard job, and Baker Dunleavy's going to see that, but fans need to be patient and again, judge him on years 3 and 4, not 1 and 2.
Well, thank you, Jeff, so much for the insight, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Make sure to check out more of our content on YouTube at the QTube channel. For Jeff Goodman, I'm Hannah Cotter. Have a good night.